hard for for-profit social ventures to get funding. The traditional investors, they don't want anything that will jeopardize their ROI, and traditional philanthropists, they hear the word for-profit and you're like, that's dirty, I just do charity. So that's the first part. Then the second part was realizing that there are not that many women, and specifically women of color, in the investment world. And we thought it would be so powerful to engage women philanthropists who already have the money and they already get the social impact component, and share with them, you know what, you can actually make an impact, a positive impact, using your money by investing in specifically women-led for-profit social ventures. So our goals are to diversify the investor pool and to connect women social entrepreneurs with investors who get them. And I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel.
Julie, before you introduce yourself, I want to tell you guys that all questions are going to be done via Twitter. If you have any questions, you can search, I think it's #SEC11, and then you'd hit hashtag #XFactorPanel and type in your question with that tag to it. All right.
What, have access to Twitter?
We'll have both types of questions.
Yeah, so if they don't have access to
Yeah,
Twitter,
if you don't have access to Twitter, it's okay. Yeah, we'll just take your questions.
We're not discriminating on technology capability. I'm Chief Muse on Twitter if you need to, tweet to me. I have, I think, 3,500 followers, which isn't too bad. But anyway, my name is Julie Lenzer-Kirk, and I am the CEO and Chief Muse of the Path Forward Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And we are a catalyst to help get more women into growth-oriented entrepreneurship. We run a program called Activate, which is, we actually licensed out of the University of Maryland in Baltimore County, that helps mainly mid-career women. That program helps mid-career women to start technology-based businesses. And when I say technology, it's not just IT, it's clean energy, it's healthcare, it's medical devices, pharma, biotech, any of those. Cat sauces, yes, actually, that's one of the things that came through the University of Maryland. It was a partnership with the University of Maryland. It's really anything that's based on intellectual property, so based on some unique idea. A lot of social ventures, a lot of women come into the program and say, I want to come in and I want to change the world. And what I tell them is, you know what, it's a lot easier to change the world when you have money. So I help them to build a business that can help to change the world, either for-profit or nonprofit. Mine happens to be a nonprofit, but that's not because we don't plan on making a profit. It just means that all our profits go back towards our mission. So I'm really a social enterprise. I selected a nonprofit because that is where our seed funding would come from, is from really foundations and passionate individuals. But we could have gone either way, actually. And I am actually a serial entrepreneur. I'm a recovering entrepreneur. I had a for-profit entity that did barcoded inventory control in the food manufacturing industry. I did that for 10 years and then sold that in '05 and decided that this is my life's work right now. So we can talk more about that later. And am in total awe, as I have always been, of this woman right here. You guys are very fortunate that to have her. She's been a mentor to me, and just
I'm just older
incredible
than her,
lady.
that's all. It's on.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is our favorite topic. Talking about entrepreneurship, talking about making a difference. And so many years ago when I was a lobbyist and thinking that I was incredibly happy, friends of mine said, you know, we've got this commission on women's business ownership and we need somebody to run it. And I thought, and I'd been doing what I was doing for 15 years and it was time to do something different. And so I took on this responsibility thinking I'll just run it, you know, this will be an interesting opportunity. And then I met thousands and thousands of women business owners with a passion for creating things. And I thought, you know, died and go to heaven. And what could I do to add value to what they were doing? And in the process of running this commission over several years, I saw that most people thought that women were only interested in running hobby businesses or part-time, you know, while you're taking care of your children, you can add some more money into the family. And I thought, there's got to be something more than that. there's got to be a potential. You know, they're not just the woman behind the man. They were people who were really interested in growing businesses. And so I looked at where the market was not connecting, and they weren't connecting for women who had backgrounds in technology, where they could actually need a ton of money to be able to build those businesses. And instead of starting it as a for-profit, we started it as a non-profit with the idea of being an educational resource for these women, as well as a connector. And for me, I'm an advocate, so that fit my profile of what I was interested in doing. And if I could connect as many people as possible, that meant that people would be able to learn more about and be able to access more information, and people who knew exactly what needed to happen in order to make their businesses successful. So that's been going on about 10 years, and the companies that we've selected to participate in our program, that's about 450 of them, have raised $5 billion, actually over $5 billion for their businesses. And many of them are social ventures. So I'd be happy to talk about specifics when we get to that.
Okay. We were going to open it up to you guys and see if you had any questions for them. You don't have to do it via Twitter. You can just raise your hand.
Let's tell stories first.
Sorry, go ahead and tell some stories.
Yeah.
So my story could have been very frustrating if it had happened before we launched Pipeline Fund Fellowship, but because it happened after, it was another example of why we need it to exist and why we need to get more women into the investment world. So I got invited to an angel networking event, and it was a group of 22 people at a conference table. It was hosted by a law firm. Out of those 22 people, 2 were women, one of whom was myself, and the other woman was about 20 or 30 years my senior. And they were talking about a startup that they had heard about and they were considering investing in, and they were doing their due diligence. And all these guys, you know, and they were intergenerational, so they were like, there was a 20-something-year-old guy, there was a 30-something-year-old guy, 40, 60, and one of them was like, well, my girlfriend thinks this, and her friends think this about it. And someone was like, well, my wife thinks this, and her friends think this about it. And it was all about that second-degree removed hearsay conversations, because they didn't feel comfortable assessing that startup, and they had to ask these women what they thought. And there I was, smiling to myself, thinking this is exactly why we need more women in the boardroom. We are consumers, and we are users, and everyone talks about, like, we have the 80% buying power in the world, etc., and yet we're not the key decision makers, especially as investors. And hearing how important it was to have the female perspective in the room, and thinking about how powerful it would be to actually, through the Pipeline Fund Fellowship, have these Pipeline Fund Fellows graduate and then join these boardrooms and then say, instead of it being like a second degree, being like, well, I think this about the product or I think that about the service, was really powerful. And that just re-energized me in a way that if I hadn't had that Pipeline Fund Fellowship idea, I would have been so frustrated about thinking about that gap of why aren't women in this boardroom, because we're on a mission to get them there.
Well, I am a geek. I have a computer science undergraduate degree, and I went to work. I actually grew up in Texas, and I went to work at IBM right out of college. And this was back in the late 80s when you went to work for somebody and you thought that that was where you were going to retire. Anybody here think that? No, not anymore. So they brought me, actually I came up here. That's what brought me to the Washington, D.C. area. And I loved what I did, but I was traveling about 75% of the time. And those of you who are, you're young, you get out of school, you got an expense account, you get to travel all over the place. It was really exciting, and I loved what I did. And I started working in manufacturing, so I was doing computer systems for manufacturing, and I love the idea of what that, I could actually see the results of what, and so I was watching Seth's videos of his manufacturing facility, and I enjoyed that. You know, I'm like a little kid. It's like, oh, look, and talking about the types of data that could be collected all along there and what kinds of information can do for you in manufacturing. It's very powerful. I'm not going to geek out on that right now, unless you want me to. But I was traveling about 75% of the time, and then I got married, and then I had a baby. And actually, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I didn't know it was a girl, I thought, you know, I'll take my 3 months off and I'll go back to my work because I really loved my work. But then when she was born, it's just one of those things, it just changed everything. I could have gone back to work and I would have been fine, and IBM was trying to be helpful. They actually put me on a local project in Philadelphia. Now, I don't know about you, but Philadelphia to me is not exactly local. It's not very commutable. So I would have been gone Sunday night through Thursday night, and 3 weeks out of 4 a month. And I made a decision for me. I said, that's not the way I want to raise my child. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I actually interviewed around looking for something that wasn't going to involve travel or not as much travel. And I just kept coming back to this idea as I'm like, you know, I wonder if I could do this on my own. And I'll be the first to admit, you know, I kept thinking, well, what's the worst case? What's the worst thing that could happen? I have to go back and get a real job. So I had been working with a firm in Ohio called the Imes Company. Anybody seen Imes puppy food, cat food? When I was at IBM, I was working with them, and I helped design their first warehousing system that took them from paper-based tracking to barcodes, and this was in the early 90s. And that I started working with them. And I kind of was talking to them, and IBM had decided not to do their contract. And then they said, well, we don't have anybody to do this. You know, if you're thinking about leaving, you could come do that with us. And so that kind of is how I started my first company. So I had a customer. It was not full-time. It was just a little bit of consulting. And I actually kind of played around with what I wanted to do at that point. This was back in '95. And I said, well, you know what? I can teach people how to use their computers in their home. And so I was the first Geek Squad. But back in 1995, some of you hopefully were all born. But computers, there weren't a lot going on in the home with the computer. I mean, you had 2 choices to get online, AOL and Prodigy. You've heard of one, the other you haven't heard of, because it's no more. And there was just not a lot to it. So it was a great idea, bad time. So that's one lesson you can learn about entrepreneurship. Timing is everything, both personally and in the market. Good idea, wrong time. So then they asked me, because I had so much knowledge of their systems, they said, we need to expand this software. We're building a new facility in the Netherlands. Would you be willing to build your company to help us to do that? And it was actually a difficult decision, because I was working 30 hours a week and making more than I'd made at IBM. And it was just me working out of my home. And it was kind of it was a sweet gig. It was a nice deal. But my husband had recently quit his job to come and work with me. And it was almost like the deal you can't refuse. And we did talk about it. It's like, all right, we'll give it a try. But again, in the back of our head, if it doesn't work out, one of us could always go get a real job. You know, so we kind of looked at what the risks were, and we decided, why not? It's worth a try. And that company built into several million in revenues, and I had 24 employees, and I had 2 kids in that time. So I had the daughter was 6 months old when I started my company, and I had another child a year later. So it was a great experience. We ran that company for 10 years. It was a brilliant business model, I will have to say, because what we did is our customer paid us to develop this application, and we retained all ownership of it. So they gave us the money to develop it. We owned what was developed, and then we went and sold it to other people. I highly recommend that if you can find that. What it told us is that there's a customer need. They're paying us to do it, but why should they own it? And at first they were like, it was standard. They're like, well, of course we're going to own it. It's like, well, you're a pet food company. What are you going to do with software? And they're like, well, yeah, you're right. I mean, you know what it needs to do, but you don't know how to develop it. So you need us to develop it. We're the ones that are really developing the intellectual property. You should let us keep it. And then you'll benefit from that because we'll take it and sell it to other people. We'll put new functions in it, and you'll get those for free. So that was kind of although they were paying us a support contract that was a couple $1 million a year, so it wasn't really for free, but they got their money's worth. Anyway, long story short, about 10 years into it, I decided that, we were talking about passion earlier, and I really loved what I was doing, but I knew this wasn't the end-all and be-all of what I wanted to do. So I cashed out of that, found a buyer in the Midwest, and I gave my baby up for adoption. I sold my software to another firm. I still get visitation rights because they still bring me back in to consult with it on occasion, and I every once in a while I get a check, a little royalty check, and it's like, oh, look, nice. I can put nice cabinets in I could redo my kitchen now. And then I started teaching this program. Entrepreneurship was just such an incredible experience for me that I couldn't understand why more women weren't taking advantage of it. And so I decided that I was going to make it my life's work you were talking about empowering women, to empower women economically to take control of their futures by creating their own businesses. And not just, and this is where Amy and I connected, is it's not just for their own income replacement, it's about economic creation. It's about building something bigger than themselves. Because the best moment in my business was when I became operationally expendable. When I was not the one who everybody was calling. When my clients would call and say, oh yeah, hi Julie, nice to talk to you. Can I talk to so-and-so? What am I, chopped liver? It used to be me that they called, and now it wasn't me. And actually, that was the best moment in my company because I knew it was something that was bigger than me. And so now I have just embarked on building a nonprofit that I know is way bigger than me, and to help, as I said, economically empower women. So that's a little bit about my story. Sorry, I'm a storyteller. I'll go on forever. But
So it's a good pathway, and so I'm not going to talk about me, but I'm going to tell you about the pathway of an entrepreneur that I know that had a passion, and her passion was to get cars off the road. That was her key. She decided that there were too many cars, and that there was an environmental impact, negative environmental impact, and that it was really important to her to come up with a solution. And so she'd come back from a trip to Europe where she and her, a dear friend of hers, had seen that they had this newfangled idea of car sharing. And that became, in 99, early 2000, a company, or at that time a social venture, the idea to make it a nonprofit, called Zipcar. And Robin Chase approached us in that year, and we said, but why would anybody want to share a car? And we said, well, we're going to put it out there. We're going to see if the investors are interested in this. But we understand that what's driving you is not the profit motive for this. It's really the whole social venture, and we're not sure that investors would really be that interested in it. And there's a great Harvard case study. If you guys, sometimes they teach it in the business schools on Zipcar, and it tells the story of the decision and the problems in starting out with partnerships, and how two founders can feel very differently about how things ought to evolve, and so that's part of the whole story of starting a social venture, is be careful who you partner with and make sure that you manage expectations and that your vision is the same if you're going at this with somebody else. But then the timing part is really critical, because in 99-2000 there weren't very many people thinking green, and Robin was thinking green big time. And so the investors were interested in her idea and the potential, maybe, and her market, which was younger people who couldn't rent cars, who would get them interested in, maybe I don't need to own a car. Maybe I could share a car. That way I don't have to pay for insurance, I don't have to worry about parking, I don't have to worry about any of these things, or maintenance. I can own this thing. So again, that whole social vision an idea that Robin had, unfortunately was not shared by the people that invested in her company. And as the market did not perform well in 2001, 2002, she found herself in a position where the investors began to panic. And the more they panicked, the more they kept thinking, forget the green stuff, let's build this business, bottom line. And they replaced her. And she found that the company was going in a direction that she did not like at all. And that happened for several years. And the idea was, is that the only thing? Was that the only good idea that she had? And we spent a lot of time working with her because her expertise, as an engineer, as somebody with a business background, as somebody who was passionate about the environment, was there something else that she can do that could fulfill that vision and that she had? Well, I can honestly say that as of today, she launched her new company. And the reason why that worked this time is because people knew that she had a strong vision and that she had founded Zipcar, and they were interested to see if she could do it again. And so the company is called Buzzcar. It's actually based in Paris. It's funded by a large corporation with a very environmentally conscious focus. And her brand, and she decided that the most important part about this was to capture community and brand it. And basically there's a lot of these companies that I've seen around, and if you have a car but you're not using it for a while, say you're traveling, sort of like sharing, timeshares or your home. This is like timeshares for cars. Or you can rent out your own car to somebody else who might use it, or make it available. And again, using technology, allowing that. The point that I'm trying to make is that everybody has more than one idea. And the most important part of it is that you have a very strong focus for what it is that you want to do and want to accomplish. And that you build, you're most likely not going to be successful the first time. And so it's like Julie said with her computer, timing is everything, passion is everything, and drive is part of it. But timing is really critical to know. For Robin, it wasn't the right time to start Zipcar in 99, 2000. 3 or 4 years later, when the world was catching up on the whole idea, she probably would have had a better chance of maintaining her CEO position and building it into the community and company that she wanted to build. Now, granted, the company is, in the next 2 weeks, will go public, and so it's doing quite well. But I think this company that she's building now builds on the lessons that she learned from the first company, and now she can say, I can build it in an image in which I know how to execute and make this work. And if this one doesn't work, she's still pretty young, that she can build on whatever she learned from this one in bringing it into the third one. And that was the email I got last night saying, all right, I know that I can do this a second time. I may even do it a third time. So
It's a journey.
it's a journey.
Amy, I'd love to build on something you mentioned. I'd love to liberate the room. It's okay to fail. And there's a huge gender card, double standard with that. And especially with the idea that when I was at a conference, Blog Her BET, Business Entrepreneurism and Technology, and one of the examples I shared was about 2 directors, one of whom was a guy, and his film bombed. And the next year, he got funding again to make the to make the film, the movie. And then Catherine Bigelow, her
right?
her film stank, and it took her years to get funding. And so there's this whole discrepancy of the war scars of guys, and how, yeah, like, he has the network now. He almost did it. He almost succeeded. Let's put money on him. And as opposed to, like, women entrepreneurs, first of all, that there's this fear of failing, and also that it's perceived in a different way. So the more that we can embrace that idea that it's okay to fail because we can learn about it from it is really powerful. And just a quick story, because I'm coming from the other end. Both Julie and Amy are doing really powerful things, especially for the entrepreneurs. I like to think of it as an equation, that there's, like, so many women entrepreneurs, there's going to be a bottleneck, and we really need to do something on the other side of the equation. We need to get the funding there for all the great ideas. And so one of the things that I see from the other end are pitches. And so a great example that I read about was that a guy is, and like, I know that there's some guys in the room, so take this as also a nice story to learn from. So a guy has a business plan that's 40% ready, and he gets called in to pitch, and he's like, I'm out the door. And the woman gets called in to pitch, and she has an 80% ready business plan. She's like, can I please reschedule? I haven't dotted all the I's, I haven't crossed all the T's. And what's for any of you entrepreneurs in training, the feedback that you're going to get, maybe you might not get the money that time around, but the feedback you're going to get from the investors is just going to it's almost more valuable than if you were to get invested, because it's going to get you closer to a business model that will actually match that market need. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That story is really powerful, and that we can think about each failure as a closer step to success, and that it's okay to fail, and it's okay to risk, because if we don't risk, then we're not going to be expanding ourselves.
It's actually better to fail fast. Might as well get it out of the way. I remember when one of my things that I did after I cashed out is I wrote a book, and it's called The Parentpreneur Edge: What Parenting Teaches About Building a Successful Business. And it's not a parenting book, and you don't have to be a parent to understand it. It really just uses family analogies. But I put together the proposal, and I sent it out to a bunch of publishers, and I actually celebrated when I got my first rejection. Because, I mean, come on, you're going to get rejected. You might as well, okay, I'm on my way. I got a rejection. This is good. Somebody actually read it. That was positive. And I finally did get a contract with an advance from John Wiley & Sons. But it took a couple rejections and some feedback and going back and forth, and that was okay. And I totally agree. I mean, failure is, it's kind of a necessary thing. So just get it out of the way. Go ahead.
Somebody asked me before about how you picked your idea. How do you know the idea that you want to pick? And there are a lot of things in this world that need fixed. And the question is, what's your passion? What is it that you're willing to work 24/7, put everything into, invest yourself, and probably your money from your friends and family in something that you feel will have an impact and matters to you? So I'm kind of interested in the audience. Who's got an idea already?
You want to share it with us?
Sure.
Sure. I'm putting together an app or series of software applications for second language learning at an early childhood, so sort of edutainment.
Mm-hmm. And what's your background? Do you need a team for this, or do you know how to do it?
I do. My background is in interactive marketing in the education space. I work for Social Learning. I will start working very soon for Kaplan. So
Excellent.
I'm sort of there. My problem has been mostly on the technical side of it, and just going at it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
What's your Twitter account?
Leon 9, like my last name. Yeah, great.
I am Nakis, by the way. Do you have one, Amy?
I'm so non-Twitter, it's unbelievable. But Springboard does. It's Springboard Ent, I think. ENT.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a question. It's interesting that you talked about the former founder of Zipcar now going at it with parents.
You know, I think the location used to be a lot more important than it is now. And I could be wrong, but I think, you know, coming from this area right here, there are not a whole lot of investors. There's other ways to get funded, but there's not a lot of investors. It's a great nonprofit environment, so it's a great place if you're running a nonprofit. It's not the greatest place if you want to build a huge biotech company or a tremendous technology company. I've got one of our entrepreneurs here in the Wheaton area has a fabulous company. I can't wait. Actually, you should go on Shop Suey Market if you can, and you would love this one.
I would.
So, Shop Suey Market, Lisa Morales Helibo is her name, and she decided that she had kids and didn't have time to go shopping. And so if she could find a way to search from a variety of different retail establishments or brands and develop, you know, an outfit or a wardrobe without having to go and buy things at each store or at each place, but have it look exactly the way you wanted at the same price point, that would be great. Well, the problem is that there are not too many investors here that value that. You know, you get a lot of people who are interested in security or, you know, high tech, anything defense related, things like that, but not, or even health related, but not really fashion. So she had to go to New York, and she had to go to California. So people understand those kind of data mining, search engine-y type things where that's not necessarily the kind of people. Now, she has a family, and her husband works here, and they're not moving. So she travels.
Yeah, or there's Skype, or there's lots of ways to build those networks in other cities, countries. I mean, I was on Skype this morning with a friend from South Africa planning my trip there over December because, you know, I mean, and it's 18-hour flight, but I mean, I know you all use Skype and video Skype, so, you know, it's like distance is, I mean, the networks, though, I think to your point, is that who you know does matter.
That's right.
You know, I would love to tell you that it's not, but it is who you know. And so you have to be able to build those networks and relationships across localities. So she went to New York and California and is building relationships with the people there, I'm assuming.
Well, and she used our network
Right.
to introduce her to the right people that she needed to know, and then built those
And
relationships.
that's a great thing about leveraging resources. What Amy does is just phenomenal because she will bring great ideas and match them with the investors that might be interested in that. And so it's finding the right resources and reaching out. If you sit in your neighborhood and try to go door to door and raise money, you're not going to do it. So you go to find the people who know how to help you do that.
So the gender lens on this is that you might actually be in the prime location but not know it. There's supposedly, apparently, there's also a difference in the way that women and men network. Men in general have one support system, one network where they get derived personal and professional support, and then women, we tend to have two types of networks, one for personal support and one for professional support. And there was a really funny story that a friend shared with me, which was that she was doing yoga next to someone that she didn't realize until 4 months later could actually be a potential investor in her company. Mm-hmm. And it's the sort of thing that you see, like, you know, like maybe a guy goes out, you know, plays some, shoot some hoops, or, you know, goes and like that same night, they might actually share both the personal and the professional. And I'd love for you guys to share this, but that's something that sometimes doesn't happen. And I've gotten pushback from women who say, well, it's because we sometimes want to keep both separate. So it is something that is coming from the women who are like, you know, we don't want to always talk shop with everyone. We want to keep some stuff personal and we want to keep some stuff professional, but it's something that we need to be aware that we're doing, because it might actually, we might be losing opportunities because we're not cross-pollinating with the people.
I think it's because men are transactional, women are relational. I mean, that's what I've seen in the women. Women want to get to know you. You want to get to know the people. Men just want to know if you can help them. Honestly, it's what can you know. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that? It's the different networking style. It's You know, that's not right? He's going, no? Is that right? You had to know. Okay, you had to know being a man in this room was not necessarily going to be safe. Okay?
I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're here.
The upper rephrase, short-term versus long-term. Connections women make are more likely to be
Yes, that's great. That's perfect.
are more likely to be short-term, which means the sustainability field is disproportionately women compared to normal industry, but still not female enough. So this is the difference.
Yeah, don't get me started on short-term versus long-term Wall Street and how businesses are run, because that's a whole nother, but you're very right, it's very true.
The X factor.
I'm wondering about the paradox of choice versus being viewed as selfish. So I've been thinking like the last couple of months, like I really want to be a social entrepreneur. I've been a nonprofit manager in advocacy, policy, and all this. I want to do this. So, you know, I went, you know, we're restructuring on our organization. I was like, I'd love to be laid off. If you give me a severance package, that would be awesome. And they did. And they're like,
Careful what you ask for.
I know, careful. So that was 2 weeks ago, and like I've been going to all these social enterprise conferences, and the only person who doesn't think I'm straight crazy and supports me is my husband. And by the way, I did this when I had like an 11-month-old, so it's like it's a bit much.
You're not hanging around the right people.
What did you mean selfish, though?
But when I tell people, like extended family, when I tell people that, you know, I'm not with an organization, I'm an aspiring social entrepreneur, people look at me like I'm crazy and kind of like hanging out. And I'm like a feminist. So also the dynamic that, okay, when I do plow through my severance, like I am going to be relying on my family. And that does go against things that I was taught, yet validates things that I was taught. So there's this balance of selfishness, but it's also like, this is completely different territory. So like, how do you whittle down like a paradox of choices? I'm like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and they all make you passionate, they all make you excited. But it's also like, pick one.
Those are called, it's called shiny penny hell, and it's not a bad place to be as long as you can get out. But
Yeah, my feeling is that you have to pick one and follow that path and see where it leads you. Other people have an idea of what you should or should not do, but that's not for you. And I was listening, Howard Schultz, you know, the Starbucks guy, was
oh, I meant to go to that
was
today.
speaking at GW today, and he said that everybody, you know, talk about failure. I mean, there was a lot of failure in the beginning, and a lot of denial, and a lot of people saying, you know, when he tried to buy Starbucks or get them to go and have these coffee houses, they said, forget it. We're a coffee manufacturer. We're not going to do that. And he said, okay, I'll go and I'll start my own coffee houses, which were not the greatest success. And he was completely broke. And the only one that stood behind him was his wife. And they had 2 young babies at the time. And the question is if you have to be passionate about it. You have to find the thing that you're passionate about, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. I mean, who would have thought that Starbucks, I mean, this is a guy from the projects in New York, and he said if anybody would have said when he was growing up that he would be running this multi-billion-dollar industry, it's his passion, and that's what drives it.
Yes, and you have to match passion with something that could actually be a business. So you have to, he had to go out and make sure that there was that he was filling a need that people would pay to have filled. So you can have you can go broke on passion, and that's not your objective, right? You want to fill a need. You want to actually help people, but you have to find things that people are willing to have to pay for. And that's one of the things we actually, that's the Activate class that I teach. We have a whole semester on feasibility. It's like, okay, you've got your passion, you've got your skills. What is the market going to buy? How are you going to make money doing this? Who's going to pay for that? And you have to ask that on everything that you're looking at. Who is going to pay for that? How am I going to, and be creative. I mean, don't just say, oh, I can't think of anything. You have to get really creative. And that's where the passion comes in. Because when you have a passion, you're going to say, how can I make this work? Not, oh, that's not going to work. And don't, if you worry about being called insane, you know, then you're going to have a rough time. Forget that. Go find other people who are equally insane and hang out with them. because entrepreneurs, we are all insane. And it's when you start to get around to people who get that and who, oh yeah, I totally get that, let's all go find our rubber room, then they'll help you, you know, to continue to foster that, because it's you have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur, because it doesn't always make sense to other people, but you have to have that vision, and you can see it, and you can taste it, and and it drives you to figure out a way to make that work.
And no is not an answer.
It's a how can we, not we can't. You know, how can we make this work?
Anybody who says no or looks at you askance, walk away.
And what I'm hearing is also maybe you still don't have that idea, and it's about being in that in transition moment, and people sometimes not accepting that we individuals, we go through transitions, and it's owning that moment, and it might be 6 months, it might be 2 months, it might be 7 months, but even being comfortable being in transition is also very important, because if you're all, you know, like very anxious, you're not going to have the space, you're not going to be giving yourself space to actually think of what's next. And the positive thing is that you now know that you didn't want to do the nonprofit thing. So in some ways, people say it's easier to finally start creating a list of the don't likes to start, you know, getting into, okay, what do I really like? And sometimes that's how you have to do it. You know, you just have to fail fast, like you're saying. You just have to cross, okay, that wasn't it, that wasn't it, that wasn't it.
Oh yeah, that's
But at least keeping yourself going so you can continue adding things to the list versus being at a standstill.
And go find a job working for somebody that has a social enterprise, you know, and see how they're doing it and how you like. I mean, so working for somebody else to learn how, let them make the mistakes on their dollar. I think you were telling somebody else that earlier. Go work for somebody or volunteer and see, okay, what is that? How does that work? Try it on. You know, we don't generally marry the first guy or girl that we meet. We date. You have to do that in business too. You gotta go out and you gotta try a couple different things on and see what works.
And just never take no for an answer. I mean, I find that the entrepreneurs that we work with never take no for an answer. And that's kind of a screening process we do. When the applications come in, we'll do interviews. And if we feel confidence, you know, we can build confidence. But if they're if they take critique to heart in a way that stops them from thinking that what they're doing is, you know, has merit, then they shouldn't be doing it. Because you've got to say, all right, how do I absorb and take in what they just said, and sort of the word around the street is, can you pivot?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not the kind of person that can pivot, then you shouldn't be in that kind of business.
And what I would say is the women, the phenomenal women that go through the Springboard program, they do their homework. You know, so they're going to go and figure out, what does it really take to do this? What's the market? And so somebody will say, well, have you thought about that? And they'll say, no, I haven't. But you know what? They'll go figure that out. They'll go research that, and they'll go answer that question. And it might take them a little bit off where they were, that pivot, but that's okay. They're not. It's okay if somebody tells them that their baby's ugly, because they'll go figure out how to make it pretty.
So I could tell this story about an Activate student that I will never forget as long as I live, because it was such an interesting discussion. She had I called it a swizzle stick, and it's something that you put in your drink, and it's like a litmus test. You could tell whether or not there were drugs, somebody date raped drugs in there. And we said to her, okay, how are you going to market this? And she said, well, I'm going to market it to students at the university. And we said, that is the hardest thing in the world to do. How are you going to do that? And she said, well, you know, I'll go to sororities and, you know, all kinds of places where there are women. And I said, well, think about what is another way to market? Who cares about this? Who has the pain other than the women of this? And she thought about it a while, and she came back and she said, well, the bars, first of all, because they get sued, the alcohol manufacturers,
the distributors and the manufacturers who don't want the bad feeling about what that is, and you know, the results of all of that. Where's the pain in the market in addition to the women? Who's really suffering because of these crimes? And she had never thought about that before. So that's kind of like a pivot in a complete marketing strategy focus that, you know, that could change the whole nature of the business. First of all, you could put advertising on it. You know, it could have all kinds of things, or information, or anything that, again, people would want to have. But for the most part, people were probably not going to go and buy those before you went to a bar or a party to drink.
So it's time for another liberation round. Raise your hand if you are a social entrepreneur or you want to be a social entrepreneur. Okay, raise your hand if you want to be involved with the social entrepreneurship sector but don't necessarily want to start your own business. Okay, so I'm liberating a few of you, but not all of you. So you don't have to be a social entrepreneur to be part of the social entrepreneurship sector. And obviously I'm coming here with the agenda of saying you can be an angel investor. You can also be part of the VC world. Something that Julie reminded me is that you can be an employee. You know, like you can actually be part of a movement, whether it's Honest Tea or something else. And it's a way that you can be engaged with the social enterprise without actually necessarily having to launch one. I personally don't think it's sustainable for all of us to start our own social enterprise. We actually need to be social entrepreneurs many times and actually effect change from within of like the bigger institutions. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're interested in, and you know, if you have any questions or any comments, we really would love for this to be a conversation.
Going off of that, yeah, we have 4 minutes left. I was wondering if you guys had any last pieces of advice you wanted to give them. I know you guys mentioned a lot of things, but maybe your favorite piece of advice?
Well, what I find is that people hesitate, and being careful and deliberative and thoughtful about things is fine. But entrepreneurship is not a spectator sport. And whether you're a social entrepreneur or you're a bottom line, you know, take it to the limit entrepreneur, you have to get in there and do it. It's about doing it, not reading about it necessarily, not thinking about it all the time. It's engaging in it. And so my feeling, I know that's not a very tangible thing, piece of advice, but just do it. Just try it. Try something. I mean, sometimes you see 10-year-olds who start social entrepreneurs. I had a young woman in Wisconsin who started a goat farm. And because her parents said that they couldn't take care of the goat, her pet goat anymore. And so she decided if she didn't go big with this, she wasn't going to get anywhere, and she wasn't going to keep her pet goat. And then she found ways in order to pay for them all with goat cheese and all goat milk and all kinds of things. She was 10, 11, 12 years old. If she can do it, we can come up with a way. There's a passion inside of you. Do it.
I would say that if you're waiting for somebody to show you how to do it, you're going to wait a long time, because there's a lot of different ways to do it, and there's no one version of success. You need to figure out what that looks like for you, and to Amy's point, build on Amy's point, try it and realize that your success is your own success, and it's going to probably be different from somebody else's, and Robin's success in the second one is going to be very different than the first one. And enjoy the journey, because it is a lot of fun. But it's the hardest work you'll ever do, but it's well worth it.
Just in terms of walking the talk, this panel is about the X factor, and one of the things that we were asked to talk about was why is it important to have women-led, and I'll even say diverse businesses or diverse teams. And one of the reasons is that, as I think you mentioned when you mentioned Wall Street, is that they're better returns. It's actually, the stats are there. They're better returns when they're diverse teams. And what that means is that we have to be patient. Because if you have like a room full of the same kind of people, they're going to arrive at the same answer, like iPad, anyone? Like, what sort of name is that? And and you're going to like do it quickly, and then you're going to realize, oops, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Or when you have diversity, there's conflict, and conflict can be productive, and it will take you a longer time to get somewhere. But ideally, the idea is that the end product is a much better product. And so one of the tips that I like to share with people is actually something that is very apropos your startup, which is actually learn a new language. Because people who speak more than one language, we know that there's more than one word for this. And having that flexibility and that adaptability is very, pun intended, translatable to entrepreneurship, and like the idea of pivoting, or the idea of seeing something from a different perspective. So if you still haven't and you have time, take up another language.
I learned how to juggle.
That helps too.
I needed to do something new.
I learned how to breathe
Yes, deeply.
deeply. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you.